Welcome everyone to Leapsome's People Over Perks Live. This is our final session for the day, and we're now diving into the question, could AI make work more human? And while we give folks a bit of time to actually settle in, join the session, a few points of housekeeping. First of all, please introduce yourself in the chat, your name, where you're dialing in from, who you work for. Please interact with one another. You can also ask questions along the way. And yeah, we want to make this interactive for yourselves. And at the same time, it's hard to monitor all the questions. So if we can't tackle all the questions along the way, we'll follow up on those on LinkedIn afterwards. So while everyone is settling in now, I think we got most of the folks here. So yet again, welcome everyone to Leapsome's People Over Perks live conference. This is our final session for the day. And we're now diving into the very important question, could AI make work more human? And at Leapsome, we deeply care about how technology can support better work, better leadership, and to help us unpack this very important question, I could not imagine to have someone more suited to dive into this topic than Cassie Kozyrkov. Cassie is Google's former chief decision scientist and one of the leading voices on humans and machines and how we can all make smarter choices together. And during her, I think, nearly 10 years at Google, she's founded the field of decision intelligence. And she's personally trained more than 20,000 Googlers, I could barely imagine it, to think about how to use technology, how to take better decisions, and to how really make decisions that truly serve people. And today she's the CEO of Data Scientific, where she advises leaders at organizations such as Lenovo, NASA, Gucci on how to bring AI into their businesses thoughtfully. So her focus is not on replacing people, but on helping them thrive by the help of technology. And yeah, we're really, really excited to have you here. And as someone who cares really about the future of work and the role of HR, which is a very big theme also among our audience, we're just really, really excited to have you. So Cassie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenny. I am excited too. So where do we start?
Awesome. So today's conversation, we don't want to make it about hype. We want to make it about how leaders can truly ensure AI is used thoughtfully to make work better, to make organizations better, to potentially make work feel more human. And this is ultimately where I would like to start. Leaders everywhere are feeling both excited and overwhelmed. And we've automated so much already in the past. And often that actually has led us to feeling more disconnected from the work. So how can AI help us to potentially reverse that and make work feel more human again?
Oh, but to get into that, there's just so much to unpack. There is our relationships to our tools in general, which is probably worth getting into. But also, when we talk about AI, I think that we've gotten so used to discussing AI, and by we, I mean the world at this point, that I think we don't really own that there are different versions of AI, that people think they're talking about the same thing. And this really becomes tricky, not at the developer level, because developers will tend to know which version of AI they're dealing with, right? Because they're in the nitty-gritty. But when you talk about AI adoption mandates, and you've got these completely different meanings running around, it is very easy for leaders to trip up and send their entire organization off into the wrong direction. So where should we start? Should we talk about us and our tools? Should we talk about these different AIs? I'm sure we'll come back around to the other one later on.
Awesome. I think we have a very broad range of people like being familiar with AI or generative AI to different degrees. So why don't you help us to unpack the basics so we set kind of like the same foundation for everyone that we can start to dive into a few topics deeper upon.
Sounds great. So I would love for the listeners to think of the AI conversation as it's a TV with 4 different channels, and they're all called AI, but they're actually completely different. So channel number 1 is the channel of theory. Channel number 2 is the channel of data, then generative AI, and then agentic AI. And what goes on in those channels is so completely different, but they build on one another. So first, channel 1 theory has been around since 1956, 1955, depends how you count it. And that's the birth of the term AI. But back then, you couldn't do anything practical with it. It was just about pattern finding mathematics, or automation mathematics. And so we had a lot of decades where there was a lot of promise and hype and sci-fi and waves of disappointment, and almost an entire world used to dismissing AI as some sci-fi stuff that doesn't go anywhere, or the people who were professionals working in it were academics. This was about mathematics. Actually, I'll say that I still notice professionals in the AI space feeling like they really should, for homework, go and study some of this theory from the last few decades. And I'd say, no, don't worry about that, right? If you're on that channel, and you know why you're on that channel, and if you know why you need that stuff, you know you need it. For most of us, we're on one of the other channels. So what is the data channel? The data channel builds on the theory channel, and the theory channel allows you to take patterns in data and turn them into recipes a machine can follow. That's what's happening there. And it's an alternative to computer programming. So the data channel is basically when you have a lot of examples or data, you could pull patterns out of these examples and turn it into a solution to a large-scale problem. So who is using data for automation? Who's on that channel? Typically big enterprises. And then there's a lot of conversation about how good is your data and where does it come from, and are we introducing biases and all that kind of stuff. That happens on that channel. Now, what is data about? It's not magic. It's memory. It is giving us the power of being able to solve complex problems that we wouldn't be able to just write down the instructions for. So at enterprise scale, you've got a really big, complex, thorny, big problem. You need to go to the memory aspect, right? The complexity, the kind of memory that can hold all that complexity, and use that for automation instead of trying to write things down. And so we still have most enterprise leaders thinking about that version of AI and getting it confused with generative AI and agentic AI, because that's where the conversation has been for the last decade. Now, what is generative AI to the other two? It's where the foundation model providers, like Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, those folks, they are solving the big, thorny, complex problem of language understanding. And so you use a bunch of data on how human language works, and you hope to be able to automate the understanding bit, which is what generative AI has done pretty well for us. Now, then you productize, and by you here, again, large enterprises are offering these solutions. So you productize this, and you give it to users and other firms to build on top of. And what you've given them is the power of language. So what powers did we have? First, we had theory, and that was theoretical. It enables all the rest. Then we got the power of memory. Memory that's better than human developers can figure things out, gives us access to complexity. But complexity also has, some downsides. If you are automating a solution that's too complex for the human mind to grasp, you won't be able to understand how that thing works. You won't be able to predict all the ways in which it can throw up interesting situations for you, for better or for worse. So that's memory. Then we go to language. We use memory to get language. And language is the interface for human collaboration. So now we're on channel 3, language. What could you do if you automate that universal interface so anybody can now talk to a machine? So to really understand this generative AI revolution as a language revolution, think back to something like, I love to use this example, I use it over and over, but Minesweeper from the 90s, for those who enjoyed it as I did back in the 90s. So think about if you kind of like Minesweeper, but you think it's too violent, and you wish that the mines were instead hearts. What would it take for you to have your wish come true? You're able to state, I want this thing exactly, but take all the mines and turn them into hearts, and also I want you to make some changes. Let's say the grid. You want the grid to be different. if you don't actually speak the language that this thing is built in, and you have no access to that code, right? You have to go from scratch. What does it take to make an app like that? You have to learn a lot of things, and it's expensive. It's expensive to try. And so either you have to pay somebody who knows how to do it and who speaks some language like assembly or whatever it was written in, or you have to go spend a year doing it. It's you have to be pretty sure that it's worth learning all that, or it's worth paying for that, in order to even have a try. But today, with generative AI tools, anybody can ask for anything. It doesn't hurt to ask. You just might get nothing out on the other side. All right, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But you don't pay the cost of having to learn an unnatural programming language first. You can just ask. Similarly, you can just, with generative AI, with language, you can just ask for advice. It changes the economics of advice. So in the days before computers, whenever we had an annoying task, we would have to cultivate human relationships and then ask humans for advice. And my strong feeling about AI advice is, if you were going to ask a human before AI, still ask a human. AI is just that second or third or fourth opinion that's now very, very cheap, because it doesn't hurt to ask. You have a thing you're wondering about, you may as well ask. The thing about how the advice is different from good old Google search circa 2015 is, if you put in all the context that you would tell a human advisor into Google search, you would get no results. And so what did we all learn when we went on the internet? We learned digital skills that said, when I want to ask for something, I got to make my query so tiny and generic that maybe I can get something back then. So we all learned how to get under-advised, which is kind of sad if you think about it. Now, with generative AI, as you put in more context, just as with human advice, you get better results, more specific to your needs. And so the sooner that we can kick those old digital habits and learn to actually think about, well, what do we need in order to get the thing we're looking for? How do we fill in enough context? We realize context is everything. And we now have the ability to supply and have processed the amount of context that we want to deal in. So this is what the gift of language is. Now, the thing about language, still channel 3, is language can only hurt you if you let it. So bad advice, you don't have to follow it. In fact, the top 3 skills for using generative AI as a user are the same top 3 skills for seeking advice. They are knowing what's worth asking about, knowing how to ask, that's how to supply all the context that's necessary for getting the results you need. And number 3, don't take bad advice, so knowing the quality. So how do you check? How do you think about, what am I actually looking for, and how would I know if it's good? And of course, the more is at stake, the more careful you got to be. If you're just like a poem about bananas in the style of Shakespeare, and you're not staking your career as a, theater or English literature PhD student on the result, if you're just like, oh, I want something fun and I'm going to, pop it on my social media, and you're an engineer, let's say, or an HR specialist who is not expected to be a Shakespeare scholar, right? That's fine. You don't have to check too hard. But let's say that you are, in fact, very much in the field, and it would be an explosive embarrassment for you if what came out had no iambic pentameter, right? There would be things that you would need to check. And of course, being able to check the quality of the advice that you get requires some experience. In fact, when you look at the 3 skills of asking for advice, the same 3 skills as wielding language, wielding generative AI, each of them is really a leadership skill, an experience skill. So the first one, knowing what's important enough to ask about, our priorities, right? That has no right answer. That takes development, experience. That's as you grow as a decision maker, you get better at that. Number 2, what context should I give my advisor in order to get something useful back? I mean, think about this, folks. The way that we approach old school Google search would be kind of like, you get the best advisor in the world, and maybe you're going through some relationship thing maybe maybe you're having marriage issues, and you run up to, you've never had a conversation with this best advisor, but you're told like they're the best in the world at advising marriage stuff. You run up to them, don't tell them anything at all about you and your situation. You're just like, should I get a divorce? Right? Like, of course they're not going to be able to help you. What are they going to tell you? They're going to give you some statistic about generically what fraction of marriages end in divorce, right? That is not helpful to you. But what is the context that you should give when trying to get help like that? That's very personal. It's about what you believe is important. You put in what you believe is important, and you leave out what you believe is not important. And knowing what context is worth supplying and carrying the context of your organization, right? That is another act of experience, seniority. It's something that you can't just plug in, because we're not in one-size-fits-all solution territory. And the last one, knowing the quality. Well, to know the quality, you have to set standards of what you're measuring, how you would weight this type of result versus that type of result. There are so many different ways that you could design metrics. And so this, again, is an act of leadership and an act of decision-making, that there is no mathematical formula that says, do it like this every time, right? It really depends. So you've got 3 AI skills that are actually very squishy and are very helped by experience, and that we are not going to automate. The bits in between, the processing of information quickly, the memory juggling, that's what we get. Language understanding, that's what we get from these tools. But being armed with the power of memory and the power of language doesn't mean you have the power of wisdom. And wisdom is the piece that's the make or break. And wisdom is the piece that's the human component forever. And if you think that you're looking at an automated system that has no humans in it, that is because the wisdom, or lack thereof, would have been applied by whoever built it and set it up and said, this is how this should operate. And trust me, whatever it was, it didn't have one-size-fits-all answers at the time it was made. So technology is always very human, and one of the skills that's worth cultivating is seeing the humans in the system. Whenever it looks like there aren't any there, it's just because they set the thing up and now it's acting as they told it to act, but still some human thought that was a good idea. So that's a good skill for us to see. So that's language. Now, we've got memory, we've got language. What if we connected language to acting in the real world? Now we have action with agents. So in order to take generative AI, this is our last channel, channel 4, in order to take generative AI and allow it to act upon the world, we're going to need a few components. Language is useful because without the flexibility of language, if we work only in stiff, unnatural programming languages, we are going to have a very limited set of problems that we're going to be able to solve. So if we want more flexibility and more complexity, we will need the language piece. Piece number 2 is something called a world model. And this doesn't necessarily mean physics, but a lot of what you would be seeing with video models is giving you physics of how the real world works. Actually, the world model component is more about cause and effect. In order to plan, you need some notion of cause and effect. What causes what follows what, which things just happen near one another but aren't causal, and which things are actually causal. Because once you know about causality, then you can plan. So that gives you the planning loop in an agent. And now we take all that and we connect it to another tool that is not just language. So you could have language hanging out, planning, but no actions are taken upon the world. That's not agentic. To make it agentic, some other tool has to move, whether it's in the physical world where we're talking about embodied AI and robotics, or it's in the digital world where we, for example, take language and connect it to a browser and a spreadsheet, and we say, go and find me all the theater shows that are showing in New York City between this and this time next week, which, since I'm in New York City at the moment, is on my mind. I might have used a browser agent, as they're called, for exactly this kind of thing. So 4 different channels, and on each of them, you notice with the research one, right? Research is still going strong and still has its traditions, but it's not the same as the others. The data one, you have lots of proprietary data that's very special to you, and you want to pull patterns out of it and automate with it, right? So typically an enterprise does that. Still big channel with lots of its concerns. Language, and how do I use it for advice, and how do I as a person take advantage of just the price of asking going down. That kicks off whole discussions of personalization, because now suddenly anybody can ask for very them specific things, and all these people suddenly empowered to learn very quickly, right? You can use AI to learn AI. And then the last one, action, is a completely different set of stuff that kind of says, okay, we've already got language. How do we safely connect language to tools so that we can all end up in a good place? So that's our 4, and it really is completely different conversations on each channel.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for unpacking that. And maybe we can actually double click on a point that you mentioned along the way, which is the power of wisdom. And the way I understood it, there's kind of 2 dimensions to it. One is understanding what human judgment is already built into the technology, even though that might not be obvious to you, and being aware of that. And the other side of the power of wisdom is then if there is a certain maybe bias or certain worldview already built into the technology, how do you become smart in terms of making sure that you provide the context, as well as asking the right question, as well as having the right sort of level of validation to know when it's bad advice or good advice. So could you maybe unpack this kind of power of wisdom and what that means for leaders, for organizations? And I think HR leaders are often kind of the partner to the leadership in order to organize the organization, the work. So they're kind of the partner to the CEO to ultimately make sure that we build these systems in an effective, ethical, and good way in organizations. So let's maybe unpack that a bit further.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of folks don't realize just how much, and this kind of ties into when you asked me about tools and our relationship to our tools. Folks don't realize just how much our tools have constrained what we think is possible. And for leaders, some of the tools that we've had are tools like a quantity like an average. If you've never stopped to wonder why so many of the metrics are in the form of an average is actually just a tool to skip a bunch of very, very difficult and annoying calculations that in the pre-computer eras, if you decided to ask questions about, let's say, the median, which is the middle thing, instead of the average, you would find that the amount of huffing and puffing that you have to do would be, days or months instead of pretty instant look up a table in the back of a statistics book kind of thing. So what we do is we sort of drift into taking for granted that is the right way to do things. That is the right way to ask questions. And so then all our questions are about averages, and nobody asks, well, what if you could ask about anything? What if you could request anything? What would be worth doing? And what skills would I need to do that? You look at textbooks on quantitative disciplines, they tend to be more about what are the steps that are taken in solving something, and less about how do I know what's worth solving in the first place? Mm-hmm. And what if I was just free, truly, from worrying about whether it's going to be 5 steps or 500 steps to get to the solution? Would I actually ask for something different? Right? And you see that we've spent so much time kind of taking for granted that this is the way we're going to do things, that we haven't built enough skills that really focus on the same skills as the advice skills. What's worth doing? Number 2, knowing how to ask. There's not only the skill of context, there's also the skill of clarity. Do I know exactly what I'm looking for? Am I able to articulate this to myself? Am I able to say why this is the thing that I want? Would I be able to distinguish it from something else? Is it important? Do I need to actually be thinking about this, or is intuition and gut feelings fine? Does it matter the quality with which my team approaches this? And our final skill is, how am I actually going to check? Should I check? And so these skills, I would relate them to not just the skills of seeking advice, but if we want to step up our metaphors, I want every leader and every HR professional supporting them to imagine the following. You get a physical, because imagination's fun and things in the physical world are fun, you get a physical magic lamp with a genie inside it, arrives on your desk. It is a fully powerful, omnipotent genie. It can do anything. In that moment that it arrives, you will realize, hopefully, coming back to wisdom, you will realize that you probably feel discomfort, anxiety, wondering whether your skills at wishing are equal to the task of, responsibly steering this genie. You realize that if the genie is as powerful as all that, that nuance actually matters, and it matters a lot. And being constrained by how you used to do things and how you used to ask your questions and what you used to request doesn't make sense anymore, that it's all about vision now. But in addition to vision, it's about priorities. It's about ethics. Just because I can ask the genie for something, should I ask the genie for something? These are very different questions. And then clarity, I may have really, really nice intentions, and that's cute. And that's fine at small scale. But when I start to make wishes that scale up, particularly, leaders of large organizations, when you are scaling through people, there are many opportunities for people to catch and adjust something about that wish being a bad idea. And when we find bad wishes in a very aligned and magnetized, like iron filings, magnetized population, we get bad results for humanity. So I actually quite like the way in which people tend to pull things in different directions to slow things down, to let us all collectively have a think about it. Whereas with automation and technology that scales, if you have thoughtlessly asked for something, you might just get it. And so the onus then is on the leader to re-inject thoughtfulness into that procedure and have more than good intentions, have the skill of clarity. Does what I've actually asked for match what I wanted to ask for? Because if that's a no, the best intentions aren't helpful here. So do you actually know how to communicate without ambiguity? Do you know how to inject as much context as is required to reduce the ambiguity? Do you think in a clear way? Is your vision clear? All these things are related to being effective in this wisdom, I suppose, sphere, in this decision intelligence sphere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the question of how would you check? How would you know? How important is it even? With generative AI, you have endless right answers. So your prompt could be a great digital experience product, right, for employees. And there may be many different ways to express the notion of a great product. Are you able to, when asking for one, actually specify what you need and understand that that's not one sentence? That's a lot of work. It's a lot of clarity and vision work to be able to use these tools. So coming back to the core question, if you got that lamp on your desk, would you be ready? The answer for all of us is no. But upon realizing that, you're going to get something close to a lamp like that in the near future, and only better and better every day, every month, every year. So the sooner you start preparing yourself, the safer the world is going to be with you in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how do we become the best possible visor, and how do we kind of like choose the right lamp or build the right lamp? Kind of like, can you make it even one step more specific for our audience on how to get there?
So some of the skills that you would list as you listed out what you need, there would be many, right? It's a whole discipline. But one of them would be, are you able to anticipate the consequences of what you've asked for? This means simulation, usually. And we can use and build tools for this the moment we realize that we've got something that we're not so good at. So we start with a kind of humility. We say humans are amazing at a lot of things. But there are a few things that, bless us, we're not good at. Memory is one of them, right? You tell me your phone number, we chat for 10 minutes, I've forgotten your phone number. I am not good at memory. Now, my pen and paper are great at memory. I've written down on the pen and paper, that tool has better memory than me. A computer has even better memory because it's faster searchable than pen and paper. So having that humility and saying, okay, what are the things I'm going to need? If I'm not so good at thinking through all the consequences, then maybe I need a tool that can help me visualize and brainstorm all the consequences. And I need a discipline to actually use that tool. Because the more nuanced the situations are that we work in, the more different options there will be, and the more different tools there will be. Like we're coming out, we're hatching out of an egg where there were relatively few tools and few problems we could solve, and we all kind of did the same thing. The world is complex and large when we all start solving very, very different kinds of problems in very different kinds of ways, and in some ways messier to coordinate. I personally believe that there will be so much more for humans to do, not less, in the AI future, once we start to see what it looks like when we're all truly doing our own thing instead of all of us doing similar things at scale. So then the tools that you're going to pick, if you're still of the attitude that, just tell me the steps I have to follow, tell me the tool set I need, you're thinking with a past mindset. The future mindset is, it's up to you to come up with the problem you want to solve, to express the tools that you need, and then to make sure that you've actually gotten them. So in the case of seeing the consequences, well, then it depends what type of wish, what type of consequences, how much simulation. Is it a pen and paper, or is it a full-on system? And at every step, because you've got a tool that's really good at advice, sometimes the advice is bad, but the advice is cheap, and that's awesome. So you can always try to use this tool for advice. Is the tool of language, the tool of generative AI. By the way, don't put private information into public tools, but there's always ways to ask for advice in such a way as you don't have to put anything confidential in there, right? So let's say performance reviews. A lot of people don't like drafting performance reviews for their direct reports. You don't have to put your direct report's name or their details in to get a first draft that will help you write that performance review faster, smarter, and in a more kind way than if what you had to sweat over was how were you going to format the thing and what paragraph goes in what order. And you, again, don't have to put any personal information into a tool to use it wisely. So to summarize that concretely, you have to train yourself to be able to clearly state what you need and what your problem needs. Then you have to find advice on how to select the tools if tools are necessary. And then you have to actually put the effort in of bringing those tools or people who can use them on your behalf into the problem. And you're going to spend so much more time on the first part, which is figuring all that stuff out, and the last part, which is checking that it all worked, and much less time in between, which is the actual doing or solving by hand. So that's our new future with AI.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for unpacking that. And I think it reminds me a bit of the conversation we had last week when we were prepping for our fireside chat. And I think you mentioned the concepts of kind of like the two sides of the spectrum, how this can actually go wrong. You either have the work slope or you have the chimeric talent. So maybe we can even, like, if we think about achieving that at scale in our organizations, how do we make that happen? What are maybe the risks on either side of the spectrum of really getting that wrong?
Yes, I love this one. So to introduce these terms, so work slop has been making the rounds now. I think it is an October 2025 term. Maybe it's a September, maybe it's end of September, right? But it's fresh. It's fresh. It's less than a month old, and I love this term so much. So AI slop is all the low quality stuff clogging up social media, the low quality videos and the low quality images and all this stuff that is all quantity over quality. That behind it, people are just trying to churn out stuff quickly and hoping to make a quick buck. And what this is doing is it's a little air pollution of the social media for the rest of us. So that's AI slop. And when AI
challenge is, if I may interrupt you, it doesn't only happen on social media, it also happens on internal channels.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is when AI slop goes to the office, its name becomes work slop. Mm-hmm. And that is where people use AI tools carelessly, unjudiciously, and just pass the work along. And this could be because folks haven't been trained and they were told AI is intelligent. And so obviously it's correct. I don't have to check it, and thereby failing one of the 3 core skills of seeking advice. Don't just take any old advice. When things are important, you got to check. And in order to be able to check, you need to know what you're looking at. If I used a tool and I translate it from English into Mandarin, and then I was like, oh, this email is great, let me send it. I am clearly failing at something because I should know that I do not have the skill of checking that. I don't know what I'm looking at. And if I'm sending that to my best friend, and I'll probably be forgiven for any transgressions, fine. If that's the most important professional email of my life, very different thing. And so then if I don't have the skills to check, I'm going to need to bring somebody else in. And that absolutely stays true for AI, and work slop can happen when people forget that. They're just like, the AI did it, off we go. So one way is just not knowing that. Easily fixable. Everybody who's heard me now, you have no more excuse for that kind of work slop. Work slop number 2 is just people don't actually prioritize that work product enough to care to make it good. And what has been found in the work slop study that everybody's referencing, more than 1,000 people, US full-time workers, have said that they've received, more than 1,000 people were the sample, and 40% of those said that they got an instance of work slop in the last month. And of those, it was about 2 hours on average, see averages again, average work of that person's time to undo the work slop. Now, the perpetrator of the work slop quite often gets off free, at least for the first instance, but the recipient has to huff and puff and fix it. And so there's a little bit of game theory going on here, because it's possible to play in a way that favors yourself, but just like messes work up for the rest of your colleagues. And if your colleagues don't then spend the time checking the work that comes from you, and they just build on top of it, if they trust you, they trust your good intentions, or they think that you realize that you have to check AI output, they think, oh, I can trust it because I've always been trusting this person's work. They build on top of it. That's work slop on top of work slop, and that gets passed on, and that's work slop on top of work slop. And so at some point, the whole thing becomes shaky. How do we deal with that? Again, a lot of education, or the first part is education. Knowing that when it's important, we've got to check, and that we have to approach AI output very differently depending on what we're using it for. The second piece is, it will be easier to be the kind of charlatan that makes high gloss, professional looking work that has no substance. And it'll be harder to detect. And so, unfortunately, in the workplace, there will be some amount of extra time from all of us that will have to likely be devoted to protecting ourselves from the possibility that our coworkers say they care but don't actually. And I can imagine a whole host of HR issues that will exist in that sphere that don't exist very much today. How do we train that out of people? How do we identify it? And then the opposite issue is the chimeric talent. And chimera being that mythical ancient Greek beast that was part goat, part lion, and part snake, I think. But also all of those things at once. So this is the opposite problem from the doesn't know how to use AI or doesn't care. This is the amazingly good AI user in your organization. The amazingly good AI user will be able to make themselves more than the boundaries of whatever traditional job role they come from. They will know that you can use AI to learn anything in whatever style is interesting to you. That includes AI itself, which means that you've got a compounding effect. And how do you do that for those listening at home? Give context. So let's say you want to learn something out there. You want to learn quantum mechanics, let's say. Now you might think, oh, you better go to school for that and learn. First, you have to eat all these math textbooks, and then you have to eat all these physics textbooks. What you can instead do is state a lot of things about yourself and how you learn. I like analogies. I hate analogies. I like concrete examples. Give me historical facts, whatever it is, right? All the things about how you learn. Tell it about where you are. I've never taken a mathematics course. I have a master's degree in mathematics, whatever it is. I like baseball analogies. I hate sports. Whatever is interesting to you. I'm bored when. I like bullet points. I like tables. Give it all the context on how you like to learn. Tell it where you're at, and then allow it to catch you up from there. And now you can pilot this system to give you a very personalized journey through whatever it is that's interesting to you. Tell it, give me a why to this for folks who are in HR. And if there is no why, tell me what better questions I could ask. Tell me how to make my question even better, right? You could do all this stuff to learn things at unprecedented paces. So if you are an HR professional today, and you're a good AI user, that is, you've mastered the art of advice and learning, tomorrow you could also begin to be a writer of scripts, which means next month you could already be writing computer code, being a developer. You can simultaneously start being a data scientist, right? All these things that were bounded professions, you can now chimerically all combine in one person, which is good and bad. It's going to give some job ladders a real rattling. It's going to be hard in traditional organizations to know what to do with these folks who now realize, oh, I wanted to turn myself into a multi-hyphenate and look at me go. But what it's also going to do is it's going to create the problem of the person who is really highly skilled, but it's their first day on the job. And we all know, hopefully, given the kind of conference this is, we hopefully all know that a highly skilled person on day one should not be productive because they're missing context. They don't know where the bodies are buried. They don't know how decisions are actually made in their organization. And by missing all that context, but having the ability to run really quickly in some direction, they might run right into a wall, and they might they might succeed at a project that was supposed to just slow them down and help them learn about the organization. They might succeed, email it out to everybody, and cause all kinds of disasters within your organization, right? So this is the overachiever, the hyperachiever on steroids. They are hard to manage. The really, really good AI user is also in some ways a difficulty for your organization. So that for leaders, this is like a pincer maneuver. You've got two different kinds of worker, both in the context of AI, working in ways that are new, and that we have to step up and anticipate and set up the human structures to support all of that.
And do you have, because I think it's so interesting, because in the end, there's so much, we've been talking a lot about manager effectiveness, and the manager is often kind of like the part in the organization where also strategy needs to be executed, high-performing teams are formed, and to some extent, we're putting even more on the manager's plate. But how do you now, as a manager, how do you orchestrate that effectively? And maybe what's the right amount of disruption to a team in order to sort of work well in the era of AI, but also how to kind of like still keep it productive and keep that team moving and functioning ideally as a high performing team, because like manager effectiveness and being a partner to managers is also like core question for HR professionals.
Right,
so do you have any advice on how we can solve that conundrum?
Yes. So first, my heart goes out to managers, because the AI revolution will likely give everybody more to do, not less, overall, on balance, particularly when we stop pinching yesterday's pennies and we start realizing that the future is going to be big and complicated, and we need to start preparing for it. So more work. We've got these forces of the chimeric talent causing a lot of energetic disruption. We've got work slop, which is causing trust dynamics among people and with equality. And all this needs to be managed in the context of change, and change that is rapid, which means that we can't predict, not necessarily, what everybody's going to be doing next month, what kind of capacity we require, how headcount is going to work, what the job ladders are going to be, right? There's a lot of uncertainty, and the skill of the manager, the skill requirements and the effort requirements, I predict, are going to go up, right? The manager's job, I believe, is going to be harder. So when you know your job is going to get harder, you also know that there are a lot of things that you do each day that are, some are necessary, and some, there are probably tools that you can be freed from. If you know that you as a manager are going to have a harder job in the AI future, and you are still doing slow, repetitive tasks, like maybe typing out your entire email, like I personally will, I will not write the email that's like, hi, how are you? All those things. I'll be like, email to Jenny, 3 p.m. Tuesday, be polite. And I will ramble this into an AI system, right? And I'll get the full email. So you just won't be able to afford not to use the tools that make you more effective, that are like not, let the non-core things of your job be taken off of your shoulders. That's going to be really, really important. But the human things, keeping that team cohesive and happy and moving in a good direction despite all the uncertainty, is going to, again, it's going to take effort. It's going to take being there. It's going to take being present. It's going to take being informed. As a manager, you're going to have to be augmented. Of all the people on your team, you might need to be most savvy with the disruptive tools so that you can steer and anticipate and catch the rest of your team up.
Mm-hmm. And I also took a lot of notes for myself here. So to some extent, is it both as leaders, as HR sort of like partners to the business, as well as kind of as managers, it's ultimately these things you've mentioned. It's like maintaining a strong vision for your company, for your team. It's ensuring we have very strong priority and focus on tackling kind of everything is abundant, like really let's hone in and focus and have priority on the things that ultimately truly matter most, is having that clarity, it's having asking the ethics questions, and ultimately that enables us to ask good questions to know if the right amount of context has been part in that query, in that question, and and
it's not just an amount of context, it's what the context is. What you show and what you don't show are human judgments. This is all a matter of judgment. And even that notion of the right. Anything that has a right answer is likely to get automated fairly quickly. Those are the easiest things to automate, things with right answers. But luckily for most of us, the world, the right answer things are finite, and there's much fewer of them. The open to judgment things, that's a whole infinity, and it's an interesting infinity to play in, and that's where we're all headed.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really strong nudge. So maybe taking it to like a very personal level. So as the leader in this day and age, what do I need to do to really develop these skills? Even potentially sometimes the headspace plays a role in a very fast moving world. So what's maybe the very particular advice you have for all of us who are leading teams, organizations, companies in this day and age? So maybe you can even like leave us with that, so we have some good food for thought on where we start with ourselves.
Yeah, happy to. So for a long time, we got used to technology as being something fiddly and complicated that takes a long time to learn or even get started with. And if that's still your mindset about technology, and you're just using AI like you use Google search, and this is an annoying procedure because you expect it to be technical, you just change that attitude to it doesn't hurt to ask. What you're asking AI for help with is that's an opportunity to audit your life in some sense. What do you believe is important enough that it could be done better, right? And what's worth doing in the first place? Because if it's worth doing in the first place, it's worth doing a little better. So get in touch with that. And then because it doesn't hurt to ask, just ask. Find what I call the zone of delight. You'll be amazed what AI can do. And you can always ask, make this prompt better than it already is. Improve this prompt some more. Say what it's for. Ask how it can be better. Go through a few rounds of that. Take that. See what you get out of it. You will find that a whole lot of things that you thought were difficult are now easy and great. You found the zone of delight. But if you're only in the zone of delight, you are terrifying as a leader because you need to find the zone of disappointment. Keep pushing past the zone of delight until you find the boundaries and you begin to see where AI falls apart, or AI falls apart without context, without wisdom, without guidance, without more information about what's valuable and what isn't. And there you will see just what the human role is by playing in both the zone of delight and the zone of disappointment a lot. So if you as a leader still think that it's some technical person's job to do this, it isn't. It's your job. In fact, we often say things like, oh, we'll just let the next generation figure out all this technology stuff. But if you think about that magic lamp that we've put on your desk in front of you, and you think about the skills, those judgment skills of knowing what's important, knowing how to actually express what you know and what you don't, and carrying that context and then checking, all of those things are not for kids. The magic lamp will be squandered if you just say the next generation is going to use it. You already have the wisdom and the context, and by having experienced life up to this point, leaders, you have the main skills, as long as you don't let yourself think that those rules, those skills, don't apply to AI. They still do. It's the same game. And so now you just need to practice. You just need to practice getting in touch with those tools. But here's what I'll say about the magic lamp and the genie and the wisher. We've talked about the genie, and that's all Silicon Valley talks about, is making these better and better general purpose solutions. And I want us to focus on the wisher and how good are your skills? How clear are you? Did you think through what you've actually asked for? Does it fit your business? How will you deploy it so that you can pull it back quickly if it's not what you want? Right? You don't go all in on a thing that scales very quickly. You find ways to go cautiously. A lot of the things that are true of your daily life will be true here as well. But there's a third component: wisher, genie, and lamp. And the lamp, that lamp piece, is how you keep a powerful genie secure and under control. And I don't want you thinking about sci-fi scenarios, Terminator or whatever. I mean, you don't want an unauthorized wisher making wishes on your genie. You don't want the genie to suddenly start acting in the world without any control from you. So that lamp structure, that piece is actually the hard piece. It's already hard to think clearly, but that's something that we can build. That's a wisdom and clarity skill. But the technology of building that lamp, that's a don't try this at home, kids kind of technology. For that, you actually need to find a vendor who does this professionally, so that the genie that they're offering you is a proper and secured one. And then it's still on you to wish responsibly. If you're not going to wish responsibly, that's not the vendor's fault at this point. That's on you not being connected to what's important in your world, to context, and to checking, and just, sensible use of technology. We are, after all, a tool-using species. And I know, Jenny, I'm going to end on a different thing, because the question was, can technology make us more human?
Yeah.
I got to answer that question. I think technology has been making us less human this whole time. I think that the bad technology that we have gotten so used to, the mouse, what's a mouse? It makes our wrists hurt. And what's a keyboard? The questions that we've been asking and answering, the internet as it is, all these things. I think of a call center, listening to some elevator music that's crinkling through into your ears. None of these things are experiences that are putting us at peak human potential, where what we get to do is think about what's important, have a vision, and then be able to make that vision a reality swiftly, effectively, and responsibly. That's being human. Having creative insight, and then that creative insight is implemented and you have a piece of art quickly that doesn't require 10 years of scratching with your fingernails, right? This is why we don't scratch with our fingernails. We go to pencils and paintbrushes and just better and better tools.
Yeah.
Technology has been dehumanizing us. The more we can use it to rehumanize us, the better. So I believe that technology will free us from drudgery, will free us from the kind of repetition that we don't want to do, so that you will have a choice for your repetitive bits, whether you want to play Minesweeper during those times to give your brain the reset, or whether you actually want to do the task by click up, click down, click up, click down, right? That's not very human. And AI will free us from that. And I'm so excited for all of us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that was so much incredibly valuable food for thought. And I'm also going to push myself to leave the zone of delight more often, explore the boundaries, and really try to hone in on the power of wisdom, vision, and all context ultimately. And working with my team, my organization, building the lamp for our customers to also get that one right. But I think it's a really, really strong message for all of us. We need to become and be the right wishers. And thank you so much, Cassie, for incredible food for thought and really, really unique takes. I'm really, really grateful that you joined us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenny.
And thank you, everyone, for dialing in for the day. It's been really great. And thanks, Cassie, so much.
Thank you.